All right. Welcome back to the live fantasy football stream provided by Sports Dente. I'm your host Ryan, joined by Umar Desai. Umar, how you doing?
Pretty good, man. Ready for week three action.
Week three, I know. Excited as always. A lot of good games this week. We're gonna run through kind of position by position, do a quick kind of start and sit for you. I know games are kicking off here in about an hour and 15 minutes, so I just want to give you that last advice. If you have questions, go ahead and if you're watching us on the website, drop us in that little chat box on the right. If you're on YouTube or on Twitter, Periscope, you can just chat right in there, and we can answer those questions for you. But Umber, let's just start. Let's start with quarterbacks. Who are some of your key starts and key sits? We're not going to go over the super obvious ones. Obviously, if you have an Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, you're probably never going to sit those guys. But any of those other ones you want to talk about, I'll let you break it down.
So yeah, there's actually a lot of good options this week as far as quarterback matchups. I know we have three games that are potentially going to be shootouts. Kansas City, San Francisco, that's going to be a shootout game, so start both quarterbacks if you have them. Detroit and New England, that's going to be an offensive fire show for sure. So if you got Stafford and Brady, those are two starts. And then also the Monday night game between Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh, that's going to be an offensive show as well. So Fitzpatrick, believe in the Fitz magic for sure. And also Ben Roethlisberger has been able to keep pace as we saw last week against Kansas City. As far as some more surprising starts and sits, Mitchell Trubisky for the Bears against the Cardinals. Now, Cardinals defense has proven that they have not been able to stop anybody, whether it's through the air, through the ground, what have you. So Mitchell Trubisky may not be a popular name as far as starting quarterbacks right now, but I think this is a good game for him to get more acclimated with Matt Nagy's offense and really put up some good points on the board against a weakened Cardinals defense. Um, Another option that I like is Blake Bortles, surprisingly. The Titans are going to be starting Blaine Gabbert this week because Marcus Mariota is injured this week. He's not going to be playing against Jacksonville. So for the pure number of opportunities Bortles will get, he'll be able to put some scoring drives and get some touchdowns on the board. So Jacksonville is totally going to be able to force some turnovers and put Gabbert in positions where they'll either force some turnovers or some three and outs, and that'll give Blake Bortles lots of opportunity to score. Also, Leonard Fournette is still questionable, so he is a game time decision, and if he plays, I don't know how effective he'll be. Same with TJ Yeldon as well. So definitely a good opportunity for Blake Bortles to build on his solid week against New England last week and just continue that into week three. Um, some surprising sits for me. Russell Wilson against the Cowboys. Based on that Monday night matchup, the Seahawks offense looks very lost. The offensive line troubles are continuing in Seattle.
Let's
Russell
just
Wilson
let's
was
just say it for what it is. That offense looks terrible.
That is for sure. They're not able to establish a running game. Doug Baldwin is out another week. I do like Tyler Lockett as far as a receiver for long-term purposes, but just based on what we could see on the offense in these first 2 weeks and against a solid Bears defense, Russell Wilson just looked not the usual Russell Wilson we're used to seeing. And the Cowboys defense looked pretty solid against the New York Giants on Sunday night.
Hmm.
So I think they continued that momentum into this week and they'll be able to put Russell Wilson in pressure situations where he'll have to throw the ball away, he'll have to scramble for just a handful of yards, or they may even be able to force some sacks and turnovers. So, unfortunately, I know Russell Wilson is one of the premier fantasy quarterbacks, but I would sit him this week if you have another option.
So I actually, it's funny you say that. I have Russ in two leagues. I also have in one of those leagues. I have Trubisky. I know you just kind of broke it down, but just for that, because it's so hard for me, especially after just seeing Trubisky, throwing almost three interceptions last week. Should have been three, threw two. Just doesn't he just misses open passes? Obviously, we're talking fantasy. We're not breaking down X's and O's of the quarterback position. But why do you feel confident I should start Trubisky over Wilson? Because I don't feel confident in doing it. I don't think anyone would, but I don't necessarily disagree with you. So sell me on that. Why I should start Trubisky over Wilson?
No, believe me, hashtag fantasy bizarro world, but I prefer Trubisky in this situation just because the ineptitude of the Arizona Cardinals defense, even if they're playing at home, they just still haven't established any sort of preventive measures to stop anybody from scoring on them.
Hmm.
So Mitchell Trubisky, even though he's still a little bit shaky as far as getting the ball down the field and getting it to premier receivers, I think Matt Nagy is the big X factor there, where he's creative in situations to give, these jet sweeps where he just got to flip the ball to a Tariq Cohen or Taylor Gabriel
Hmm.
or possibly their rookie Anthony Miller. Also, we finally saw Trey Burton get into the action last week against the Seahawks as well, so he'll definitely be able to leverage that in the field as well. And just going back to Russell Wilson, I just unfortunately that offense is just nowhere where unfortunately Seattle's fans want them to be. They're not getting any sort of solid run game going. Um, with Doug Baldwin out, that's a big factor for Russell Wilson. He's his go-to receiver, and also they don't have a solid tight end. I mean, look at last year when they had Jimmy Graham, who had 10 red zone touchdowns, and he was a key piece to move the ball a little bit down the field.
Hmm.
So they don't have a solid tight end yet. I mean, I know Will Disley has 2 touchdowns in 2 straight weeks, but that's a very shaky start that I wouldn't put all my money on starting Will Disley to move the ball down the field for Russell Wilson. So yeah, it's very, very risky to make that start switch between Trubisky and Russell Wilson, but based on the matchup for this week, Trubisky has a better chance to put up some points compared to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and it's kind of always been throughout Wilson's career, just speaking fantasy specific, kind of like a must start until you prove otherwise, until you start going on that downtrend. And this year, unfortunately, has been the opposite. It's kind of like prove to me I can start you just because of
Hmm.
how porous that offense is. As you mentioned, Will Disley has kind of been the darling
Hmm.
surprise there, but in reality, I think he only has 3 or 4 targets per game or 3 or 4 receptions per game. So he's getting big chunk plays, which are great, but it's not sustainable, and so it's not something you want to bet on week to week per se. Um, all right, well, hey, I'm gonna roll with Trubisky, so we'll see. We'll talk next week and see if I'm thanking you or yeah, or
Cursing
not,
my name. Yeah, we'll see how that
or
goes
not.
coming into next week.
Yeah. So he was your surprise. Any other surprise hits besides Wilson at the
Also
quarterback
Philip
position?
Rivers. Philip Rivers against the Rams this week. I know Philip Rivers is also similar to Russell Wilson, a fantasy starter every week, and for a lot of people, he was a very sneaky pick as far as your drafts are considered. He was going in the late, 11th, 12th, possibly even 13th round compared to all the higher quarterbacks, but he's always an offensive fire. He's always great when it comes to putting points on the board fantasy wise and in the offense as well. But that Rams defense just looks really strong right now. And I know they played two relatively underperforming teams in Oakland in week one, and then they played Arizona in week two. So this is more stiffer competition for them. But I think two of those games, you could call them tune-up games, quote unquote, have really put them into a good rhythm. They'll be able to prevent Philip Rivers from moving the ball down the field. Keenan Allen, unfortunately, I think will be prevented by Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters. Antonio Gates still has to get involved in that offense after being not in part of the system the entire offseason, whether he was going to sign, whether he was not going to sign. So that's something it'll be hard to depend on. They may lean more heavily on the running game. So Melvin Gordon may be a good start this week, but Philip Rivers is I if you have another option, I'd probably leave him on the bench.
Yeah, I think whoever is playing the Rams week to week is probably going to be a most likely a sit, but they haven't allowed a point in 6 quarters, so not what you
Yeah.
want fantasy wise going against you. Um, so okay, anything else for the quarterbacks before we move on?
Um I have one start, one sit, and it's the same game. Raiders versus Dolphins. I like Ryan Tannehill. I do not like Derek Carr.
I like it. Okay, Tannehill's looked good so far.
Yeah, that the Miami is going to be a surprise team this year. I mean, based on what they're being been able to do on offense and also what they've been able to do on defense. So for that reason alone, I like Ryan Tannehill to put some fantasy points for you. But I don't like Derek Carr. I just don't think that offense is going to be able to generate any sort of rhythm and move the ball down the field at all. So yeah, the Dolphins are going to be a surprise team. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think Tannehill. Also, not that wins matter that much in fantasy, but I believe he's 9-1 in his last 10 starts. Kind of a surprising. I think he has one of the highest win percentages among quarterbacks currently in the NFL.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely.
So,
So yeah, definitely start Ryan Tannehill, sit Derek Carr.
okay, I like that. Moving on, let's move on to running backs. Obviously, a lot of new, not a lot, I should say, but some new starters this week based on injury. Obviously, Dalvin Cook is going to be out. Joe Mixon going to be out, among others. So, who are some of the starts you got? Any of those guys that are filling in for those injured players, or any other kind of surprise starts that you have at the running back position?
So you just brought up Joe Mixon. Giovanni Bernard will be stepping into his role, and he should facilitate the offense similarly to what Joe Mixon was able to do. I think Joe Mixon is a little bit more dynamic than Giovanni Bernard, but he bears a similar skill set, so he should be able to perform well. I don't like him this week against Carolina, though. I think Carolina has a really strong defense. I mean, Luke Kuechly will be able to prevent him from getting any sort of offensive rhythm going on right there. So I would actually sit Giovanni Bernard this week. Um, a surprising sit as well, David Johnson.
Mm.
I know that David Johnson is, probably a lot of people's top overall pick, or possibly went in the top five of your fantasy draft. But based on what we've seen so far, David Johnson has not been able to establish any sort of um, offensive ability right now. And, similar to what we said before, the Cardinals team overall is just not doing anything as well as moving the ball or preventing people from moving the ball. So, I mean, until we can see some semblance of the Cardinals offense being able to get down the field and get points on the board and actually look like an NFL offense, unfortunately, David Johnson is a sit because yeah, as great as it is, as great of an ability that the guy has, and he only suffered a wrist injury last week, so it's last year, excuse me. So it's not even affecting the injury's not even affecting him this year. It's just the ineptitude of the offense. So as great of a player David Johnson is, unfortunately, that's a sit.
Yeah, it's always a bummer when your second overall pick you're required to sit because of how bad they've been. That's never
Oh yeah,
between
oh
him
yeah.
and Le'Veon Bell. There's a lot of upset fantasy owners out there between those two players.
Oh yeah, believe me. So it's like similar to like how we were talking about sitting Russell Wilson and starting Mitchell Trubisky. This is a situation where it's like if you have other options, unfortunately, it's like sit David Johnson on the bench and start somebody else that you may have. Um, One other note, Matt Breida. I know he's currently leading the league in rushing, but against the Chiefs defense, I don't see them being able to I don't see Matt Breida, excuse me, being able to establish that similar sort of effectiveness against the Chiefs. The Chiefs actually have a really good rush defense. The problem is their pass defense, and that's how they've been allowing points on the board.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got Jimmy Garoppolo, that's a different start, but I don't think Matt Breida will have as good a game today, so I would probably leave him on the bench, similar with Alfred Morris as well. As far as starts now, jumping into starts, Wendell Smallwood from Philadelphia Eagles. I
Mm.
like him this week. Jay Ajayi is going to be out. Darren Sproles is
Shocker.
going to be out. um, Corey Clement is questionable going into this game, so if he does play, I have a feeling he may be a little bit limited, but Wendell Smallwood is 100% healthy. So with Carson Wentz coming back for his first week after his serious injury last season, I have a feeling they may ease him into the offense. They're not just going to go out there and just run a full offense with Carson Wentz just yet.
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably acclimate him just a little bit this week, possibly even into next week, and that's where the running game can really be effective this week against the Colts. So I do like Wendell Smallwood, sort of a surprising start there. Um,
Yeah, and according to Ian Rappaport, Corey Clement should be a go. Said he should be fine. So I honestly kind of like both those guys. Like you mentioned with Carson Wentz, ease him into it. I think they're both going to get ample playing time considering it's the
mhm.
two of them. They're going to get a lot of check down passes. They're going to, they want Wentz not to hold on to that ball and get taken hits. So if you have either one of those guys, I think I'd feel confident throw him in that lineup.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, I do like Corey Clement. Just yeah, with his questionable status, I don't know how effective he will be, but he is a good start for sure if he's going to be playing in the game. And yeah, Wendell Smallwood will be the backup, and I think he'll get heavy involvement as well.
Very good. So two questions I have for you about the running back
hmm
position. New England, always just a tough backfield. They use so many different pieces. Is there a certain player you like? Is there anyone you like? Is there multiple ones you like? How do you feel about the Patriots' backfield this week?
So yeah, I 100% agree, and lots of fantasy owners know that the New England backfield is really just whoever has the hot hand. One trend that I am seeing based on the past 2 weeks is James White has been consistently performing both in the passing game as well as the running game. So he's a starter definitely every week. I think Bill Belichick has come to rely on his abilities as opposed to the rest of the running backs, where it's just whoever is performing well, they'll get more touches in the offense. I like James White week in and week out as far as a Patriots running back. I think eventually Sonny Michel will get a little bit more involved. I know he had the injury coming into the season, and they wanted to ease him into the offense. He got some involvement last week, and I think against Detroit he may get a little bit more involvement. But I think the key week for him will be week 4 when they come back home against the Miami Dolphins. I think that's when he'll finally get more involvement into the offense and could be a usurper of some of the touches in the backfield. Rex Burkhead is a bit of a wild card. Some weeks he looks great, some weeks he doesn't get involvement in the offense. But yeah, if there was a Patriots running back that I would roll with week in and week out, it would be James White.
Gotcha. Very good. I have him, so that's good to know. Good news. Final question. There's been a lot of, I think, conflicting. I don't want to call them reports, but conflicting opinions. Alex Collins, Baltimore, obviously facing Denver today. Going into the season, he was kind of the everyone was excited about him the way he finished last year, and he really has been underused. Buck Allen's been getting more carries. I feel like Collins obviously had that fumble in Week 1, which kind of made him ride the bench the rest of the game. What do you feel with Alex Collins at least this week at home against Denver?
Denver's defense is a little bit tough to run against as well as pass against. I mean, they have overall good defense, so I don't like Alex Collins's performance this week. But overall, as far as the season goes, I think the Ravens team in general has just been a little bit shaky. I mean, obviously, week 1 they faced against a very poor Buffalo team, and they just ran roughshod through them. But then they came and they faced a very capable Cincinnati team, and they did not look like the same team as they did in week 1, confident and able to move the ball down the field as much as they were. Cincinnati was a more capable defense. Joe Flacco looked a little bit lost. They were not able to establish a solid running game. The big thing that you mentioned is that Javorius Buck Allen has been able to steal a couple touchdowns when they got into the red zone. So it is leaching into Alex Collins' opportunities, but I think as the season progresses, I think they'll be able to involve Alex Collins into the offense a little bit more. He is a more capable runner compared to Javorius Allen, whereas Javorius Allen's good in the passing game, but Alex Collins does have good ability in the passing game as well. So I think you need to just be patient with him. He will be able to perform as the season progresses. So I know it's early looking a little bit rough, but yeah, just be a little bit patient, and I think he'll come through.
Gotcha. But this week, he's a sit.
This week, I'd probably sit him. I like Denver's defense against Baltimore.
Cool. Okay. Moving on to receivers, or did you have anything else for running backs?
As far as Packers Redskins, I know Adrian Peterson is the lead back there, but I prefer Chris Thompson. I think he's getting a lot of involvement in the passing offense, and Alex Smith has been nicknamed Captain Checkdown in the past, and I mean that trend has sort of been continuing in Washington. So Chris Thompson's getting a lot of involvement, and he would be the one to own as far as PPR leagues are considered for sure. I know most leagues are standard for PPR now, so definitely I would choose Chris Thompson over Adrian Peterson. But Adrian Peterson is a good start as well. Just I think Chris Thompson will perform a little bit better compared to Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that game before we move on. So, Aaron Jones back from suspension for the Packers. Are you touching anyone in that backfield? You got Jamal Williams, Ty Montgomery, Aaron Jones, kind of a three-headed attack. Ty Montgomery is obviously going to be the third down, probably passing back. Williams has really kind of underperformed or underwhelmed, if you will, in those first 2
Mm-hmm.
weeks. A lot of people are high on Jones, but coming off a suspension, he's kind of in the doghouse. Are you touching anyone in that backfield?
For this week, no. I think it's a barometer check for the Green Bay Packers backfield because Aaron Jones displays the best ability out of the three running backs. So I think he will be the starter going long term, but this is a good week to gauge as far as who's going to be able to get the lion's share of the carries, whether it's going to be a full like running back by committee situation, because then you want to avoid all running backs as far as a weekly starter is concerned. So going up against Washington, they have a little bit of a weaker defense. This is a good chance for them to see who can establish themselves as the lead dog. And especially with Aaron Rodgers still nursing that knee injury, they may try and lean more on the running game to help alleviate some of the pressure on Aaron Rodgers in the offense, the passing offense, excuse me. So, yeah, definitely sit all Packers running backs this week and use it as a gauge as far as who's going to be the lead guy going forward.
Yeah, and what they showed last year was kind of different week to week. So,
Yeah, for sure.
um, cool. Okay, well, we'll watch that moving forward. Moving on to running back, or excuse me, wide receivers. Uh, who's some of your top starts? Obviously, bigger pool at the receiver position, but got some good matchups this week. Who you got?
So I got some interesting starts this week. Kenny Galladay versus the Patriots this week. I know Golden Tate would be an obvious start. Marvin Jones would be an obvious start, but Marvin Jones is coming into the game questionable. So I mean, most likely he will play. But I like Kenny Galladay in the slot based on what I've seen as far as the Patriots defense is concerned, defending the second and third receivers. So Kenny Galladay will get a lot of work, and he had just a monster game last week as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be able to build on that. Um, Saints Falcons, I like the rookie Calvin Ridley. He finally got more involvement last week,
Love
and
Calvin Ridley.
yeah, and I think definitely with Devontae Freeman out, Dan Quinn has stated that he wants to get Calvin Ridley more involved in the offense, and that definitely showed where he finally was able to get a touchdown on the board, and overall more than one target than we saw in Week 1 against Philadelphia. So definitely, I think he'll get more involved this week as well. And even once Devontae Freeman comes back, now that he's established in the offense, he's getting more looks from Matt Ryan. Calvin Ridley is going to be a good start going forward, and I especially like him in a divisional matchup against the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
Two other starts that I like, also sticking to the Saints Falcons game, Ted Ginn Jr. I know Michael Thomas is the lead guy there. He's a must start every week. That guy is
Yeah,
just
no point. No,
straight up balling every
yeah,
week. So
no point
that's an
even bringing him
obvious
up.
start. That's an obvious start. But I like Ted Ginn Jr. as far as a dart throw this week, a lottery ticket player, as a lot of people like to refer to. And in a divisional matchup against the Falcons, I think he'll be able to leverage his speed as well as take advantage of the injuries that the Falcons are currently facing. I know they lost Keanu Neal, they lost Deion Jones. Coming into this game, Tack McKinley, their lead pass rusher, is not going
Mm-hmm.
to be playing, so that should give Drew Brees more time to get the ball down the field for those big chunk yardage and possibly some big chunk touchdowns as well. So I like Ted Ginn Jr. this week. Um, as far as PPR formats as considered, like I said, most leagues are PPR format now. So I like Ryan Grant against the Eagles. Eagles' pass defense has not been performing the way they should be. Just the defense has been able to stop the run and get some pass rush going, but the secondary has not been as effective as they can be. We definitely saw that when they played Week 1 against the Falcons, and Julio Jones just lit them up. And we saw that last week against Tampa Bay, where Ryan Fitzpatrick continued to be Ryan Fitzmagic with Deshaun Jackson burning them and Mike Evans burning them. So definitely Ryan Grant's a good start. Last mentioned, T.Y. Hilton's an obvious start then, but I like Ryan Grant to move the chains, get some first downs, convert some third downs. Definitely as a PPR machine for sure against the Eagles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that as well. So, how you feel about Dante Pettis with your Niners?
Dante Pettis with my Niners. Marquise Goodwin is still questionable coming into this game, so even if he does plays, I don't know how effective he'll be. Dante Pettis was a bit of a ghost against the Lions last week. A lot of people thought he'd get heavy involvement, especially with Marquise Goodwin going out and him scoring a touchdown in Week 1 against Minnesota. But coming into this game, I don't like him too much as far as a fantasy prospect is concerned. I think we still need to see him get more acclimated into the offense. And based on what I've seen in the past 2 weeks as well, Jimmy Garoppolo is going heavy after George Kittle. So
Mm-hmm.
he's a start. That'll be a little bit later in the game. That a little bit later as we get to the tight ends. But because of his heavy involvement with the tight ends and Pierre Garcon, I don't think Dante Pettis will get as much touches. So I'd probably leave him on your bench.
Okay, good to know. And Yeah, I mean, I got you hit pretty much all mine. I think Josh Gordon is kind of the hot topic this week. Obviously, going getting traded to New England. I would not feel confident starting him yet. Supposedly nursing a hamstring industry injury. Who knows if that's all smoke for him missing last week's game anyway. But just while he gets acclimated in that offense, I would not be starting him. I don't know if you feel differently, but I would at least be gauging that for at least a week just to see where he'll be at in the near future.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. He's still a wait and see approach because the guy has immense talent. That's no question about that. But getting acclimated to a New England style offense, Tom Brady is very precise as far as what he wants from his offensive weapons to accomplish, and precise route running, precise memory of the playbook, and things like that. And coming from Cleveland, where I'm pretty sure it wasn't the same aspect and culture there, Josh Gordon needs to get acclimated to that, get acclimated to playing with Tom Brady, and like you said, possibly that hamstring may be an issue as well. So he's a wait and see. But I think the potential there is very high for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, even just on a bigger note, the guy hasn't played in almost 3 years, really. So I mean, I know he finished out last year, but we got to see what at least we have him in playing condition, and um, obviously he played week one too. But yeah, so it's definitely a guy that I'm skeptical on for now. Obviously, he can prove being with Brady, he can definitely become that awesome fantasy start, and that team is now a Super Bowl contender. Well, they are no matter what every year, but he'll be interesting to watch. But yeah,
Of
definitely,
course.
definitely this week he is riding my bench. So before we move to tight ends, was there any other receivers you wanted to touch on? Starts or
Uh,
sits?
yeah, I wanted to go over the sits that I had this week. I got some premier receivers that probably don't have the best matchups this week. So, first I'd go with Allen Robinson. I know he had close to 12, 13 targets against Seattle, but matching up against Patrick Peterson, I think he'll get shut down. So, as much as I like Mitchell Trubisky this week, as far as the start is concerned, I think he'll go different route as far as hitting up different receivers. So, hitting up Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel. He'll probably hit Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen out of the backfield, and of course Trey Burton as a tight end, because I think Allen Robinson will be covered pretty efficiently by Patrick Peterson. So avoid Allen Robinson if you can. Same goes for Keenan Allen going up against an elite Rams defense. Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, whoever's going to be covering him, they'll be able to lock up Keenan Allen. He may still be able to get a garbage score probably at the end, but not worth it to start in your fantasy lineup if you can't avoid him.
Mm-hmm.
Amari Cooper in the Raiders offense. Like I said, I don't like Derek Carr this week. I don't think they'll be able to move the ball through the passing game. I do like Marshawn Lynch as far as a running back, so I think they'll be able to get a running game going. But as far as a passing game, I do not like Amari Cooper. And then finally, Larry Fitzgerald against the Bears. Larry Fitzgerald is a little bit questionable coming into this game. Most likely he will play, and he should be still effective. But based on what we've seen again with the Bears defense these past 2 weeks, I think they'll be able to limit his production and really put Sam Bradford in positions where he'll have to throw the ball away or take sacks or force some turnovers. So I really just don't expect Larry Fitzgerald to go off the way we're normally expecting him to.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen anything from Sam Bradford that you can get excited about. So until either they make a change at quarterback or Bradford turns things around, yeah, I'm kind of staying away from anyone on that Arizona team, unfortunately.
Oh, for sure.
Another one I wanted to mention, and your thoughts. John Brown in Baltimore had been kind of the exciting, um, quick receiver out there. Goes against Denver this week. Is he worth the hype? Is he, kind of just a week two, week one darling, or what's your thoughts on John Brown?
I do like John Brown, and I do like the Ravens passing offense. I think it's going to be a lot better compared to previous years. But I mean, I think we touched on it before. The Denver offense, as far especially passing, sorry, excuse me, passing defense, not offense,
Yeah.
is pretty effective as far as preventing receivers from establishing any sort of rhythm and moving the ball down the field. So because of the matchup, I don't like John Brown this week. I also know that as a former Arizona Cardinal, I've watched a lot of him playing against my San Francisco 49ers. So I do know he has tendencies to have these, you know, peaks and valleys as far as like performing well for like a couple weeks and then being a complete non-factor certain weeks. So I think this may be a case where John Brown just had a really good week, but in that offense, I don't know if he'll be able to sustain that sort of consistency. But definitely, as far as this week is concerned, with Denver, as his opponent. I don't like him this week.
Yeah, I use him as a sit. I think he'll be lining up mostly probably in the slot, meaning he'll get Chris Harris Jr. Shadowing him most of the game, which is not a DB you want to be going up against in fantasy realms as well as
Hmm.
just in a game live situation. So staying away from him for now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
that's all. Anyone else want to add before tight ends?
No, those are my key sits and starts for this week. So yeah, we can jump on right into tight ends now.
Tight ends. Let's hear it.
So as I alluded to earlier, I do like George Kittle against the Chiefs. Based on just what I've seen in the San Francisco offense, Jimmy Garoppolo has found his favorite target, and that's George Kittle. I think once Marquise Goodwin is back and he's healthy, he's going to be a key target for Jimmy Garoppolo as well. But George Kittle has definitely been a target machine. He's leading the Niners in targets right now. The only problem that I see with him is he's getting lots of targets, but he's not converting them into catches just yet. But because of the fact that he's going to get lots of opportunities to get some catches, that's just optimism for me that he'll do well against the Chiefs and get possibly a score. Definitely get, possibly 75, 80 yards against the Chiefs as well. So I like Kittle. Um, in a barn burner on Monday night, I like OJ Howard, tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They drafted him as a receiving tight end, so he's definitely going to be able to move the ball down the field. I think last week he had a stat line of 3, 4, 85 and a score, so he's definitely a guy that can, once he gets the ball, he's a good yards after the catch sort of guy too, so he's definitely got the speed to move the ball down the field and break off some defenders. Other starts I like Ben Watson against the Falcons. Ben Watson had his most successful year in the NFL when he played for the Saints in 2015. In those two games against the Falcons, he was able to get 22 targets and 16 receptions, also with two scores in each game. So Benjamin Watson is definitely a guy that's able to score against the Falcons defense. And as we mentioned before, the Falcons defense has taken some blows recently, so Benjamin Watson will be able to get some involvement in the offense and possibly actually get into the end zone finally. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, I like the Bears offense this week against the Cardinals. So definitely Trey Burton will get a lot of work and continue his strong showing like he did against Seattle last week.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up OJ Howard again. I think we've been kind of waiting for his coming out party. Obviously, the
Hmm.
talent's there. He's a freak of an athlete. Just the speed, the size, quickness,
Hmm.
agility, his hands. It's, is the full package, and
Oh
he's
yeah.
and he's flashed that since his rookie season. And finally, this year we've started to see a little more production. I want to see more. I want to see him target, especially with the kind of numbers that Fitzpatrick's putting up. I wish more of that was going towards Howard. But
Sure.
but maybe this is the week that he really has. Not that he hasn't played well this year, but this is his true coming out party this week potentially.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I mean, you wouldn't think about it, but based on what we've seen in the past 2 weeks, Tampa Bay has some pretty good weapons. I mean, Mike Evans is a beast on the outside. Chris Godwin is a sneaky good receiver as well. Deshaun Jackson is having like a throwback year. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's
Yeah.
finally performing. And I do like Cameron Brate as well, their other tight end.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Jameis Winston was more of a fan of Cameron Brate compared to OJ Howard. And currently Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starter, so I think he's smart enough to realize that I need to find the open guy, whoever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And Cameron Brate is good for those short yardage and possibly red zone conversions, whereas OJ Howard is a good down the seam sort of player. Like I said, he can get you chunk yards as a tight end. He's got great speed, as we just mentioned. So I think finally we're going to see OJ Howard become more involved in the offense. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Ryan Fitzpatrick hasn't looked his way too much because he's got lots of other good weapons as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think this is finally going to be OJ Howard breakout season of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say because I mean Tampa Bay does have a very I don't want to say underrated, but not very talked about offense until
But yeah.
obviously they're the talk of the town right now with Fitzmagic and what he's done.
Hmm.
But no one's really mentioned their offense. But they do have those weapons. It's kind of funny. Last week we talked about Deshaun Jackson. We mentioned him as a sit, and then the
Yeah.
first play of the game gets a 75-yard touchdown. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's just the way their offense is rolling right now. So they're kind of, if
Exactly.
you have anyone on the Buccaneers until proven otherwise, I would throw them in your starting lineup.
Hmm.
One other tight end I wanted to mention, and you can, for starting wise anyway, Eric Ebron over in Indy has kind of revitalized his career over there with Andrew Luck. Jack Doyle's out this week, So he is even with Doyle in there, he's had a touchdown each game. He's looked good, averaged I think double-digit fantasy points both weeks. And now that he is the sole, obviously they'll have other guys coming off, but he's Jack Doyle not there this week. I like Eric Ebron in the start.
Yeah, he's not a bad start as well. The only thing that worries me is that Philadelphia's linebackers have been able to cover the tight end pretty well in these past two games, so that may limit some of Eric Ebron's potential. But the biggest factor going for him this week is yes, Jack Doyle is out this week, so he'll definitely get more involvement in the offense for sure. But yeah, Philly has been able to contain the tight ends pretty well these past 2 weeks, so that's the only thing that worries me. But if you have him, I definitely would start him though.
So let me ask you this, and this maybe hopefully someone else out there has this same exact same players. One team I have Eric Ebron, Kyle Rudolph. Who you starting?
Ooh. Kyle Rudolph is playing against Buffalo this week. So
Yeah.
I think that answers the question.
Yep. That's all I needed you to say.
I know that because they're playing Buffalo, we may see involvement from lots of offensive players for Minnesota. So Kirk Cousins is likely to go off, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. Dalvin Cook is out, but I do see Latavius Murray having a really good game against Buffalo as well. But Kyle Rudolph is a red zone monster, so I think definitely he may get a score, possibly even two, depending on what happens once they get into the red zone. But yeah, unfortunately, with those options there, it'd be hands down Kyle Rudolph over Eric Ebron.
Yeah, if you're catching the theme here, if you have players that are playing either the Cardinals or the Bills, must starts, no
Must
matter what their
starts.
names are. It could be Ryan Dyrud lining up in a Vikings uniform. If they're playing the Bills, start them.
Oh, of course. Yes.
So, all right,
Yes.
who are your sits for tight ends?
Um, Evan Ingram against the Texans.
Yep.
Evan Ingram has not been looking like the tight end that we all were come used to expecting from last season. I think part of that is the fact that the Giants lost Odell Beckham last year. They lost. They just didn't have a running game last year. So Evan Ingram was their only option to throw to, so that's why he got heavily involved in the offense. He had over 100 targets. Definitely looked like a guy that was going to break out. But I think now with Odell Beckham back, Sterling Shepard, Saquon Barkley, obviously, there's the ball is getting spread around a little bit more. So Evan Ingram did get a touchdown last week, but he's just not been the same effective tight end that we're used to seeing. So I would sit him against the strong Texans defense as well. Um, Tyler Eifert is also a guy that, he had that one great year a couple seasons ago. He got hurt, obviously, and was out for the next season. But he just hasn't been able to establish himself as a solid, reliable option for Andy Dalton to throw to yet. So I will leave him on the bench, especially against a strong Carolina Panthers defense. And lastly is Jared Cook. I think we talked about it where Jared Cook had a sensational week one, but I think that was just because they had to go to him because they were facing the Los Angeles Rams with Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib, so that limited the production out of the receivers. They were able to leverage the middle of the field, their weaker linebackers, so Jared Cook was able to get very involved in that offense. But then we saw the regression in the next week. Jared Cook was not as effective, and I think that continues against the Dolphins as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention Evan Ingram again. It needs to be mentioned at least that last week his lone touchdown came in garbage time, which
Hmm.
everything counts in fantasy.
Oh,
But
of course.
but looking forward, that's something that definitely you want to take note of. He was very few targeted throughout the entire game.
Hmm.
Perhaps this will be my little soapbox rant real quick, and then we'll move on. Perhaps the most disappointing team I think in the NFL so far is the New York Giants, with how much talent they have in offense, bringing in Pat Shurmur as their new head coach, and they have just looked awful. Obviously, playing against Jacksonville and Dallas, two very good defenses, but they just can't get anything going. The offensive line has the same struggles as last year. Saquon Barkley, outside of one 63-yard touchdown run, has not looked very good running the ball. Not that he hasn't looked good, but the offensive line really hasn't given him much, so the production hasn't been there minus that one run. So that whole offense really needs to get it together if I'm feeling confident at all starting anyone, even Odell Beckham Jr. In a fantasy
Hmm.
lineup, because unfortunately the way Eli's looked and just the whole their production's gone. I'm staying away from them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, there's a reason they had the number two overall pick to select Saquon Barkley. I mean, that team has lots of deficiencies all over, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. So it's Yeah, it was great to see, like you said, Saquon Barkley break off that long run in his first week, but I just don't see any sort of consistency or any sort of identity on the offense right now that would make me a firm believer to start an Evan Ingram, a Saquon Barkley, an Odell Beckham Jr., Sterling Shepard, any of those guys on offense. Definitely Eli Manning. Avoid that guy at all costs.
Yeah,
So definitely, yeah, the Giants' offense, as far as fantasy is concerned, and definitely Giants' defense, as far as fantasy is concerned, are avoidable right now for sure.
yeah. If you have other options, I would recommend those. Um, it is worth noting Eric Flowers, their tackle, is not starting today. So Pat Shermer just announced he is riding some pine, which I
Yeah.
think that's been needing to happen for a long time. Did you want any other tight end sits, or do you want to just list the couple defenses
I think we jump into
before?
kickers and defense. Yeah, I think that lists out all the tight ends this week.
Yeah.
As far as I mentioned earlier, as far as offensive performances this week, as far as games to watch for pure offense, Travis Kelsey, George Kittle in the Chiefs Niners matchup should be good. Detroit doesn't have a solid tight end, so I wouldn't roll with any Detroit tight end, but definitely Rob Gronkowski against Detroit. That's a everyday start. I mean, that's for sure. And then in the Monday night game, we already talked about Jordan Howard. Sorry, OJ Howard, excuse me, and also Jesse James for Pittsburgh. That's actually should be a pretty good start. I think the biggest thing that's going to help Jesse James separate himself from Vance McDonald is two things. One, he's developed a solid relationship with Ben Roethlisberger, so Ben Roethlisberger is looking his way consistently. And Vance McDonald, former 49er, there's a reason we traded him away. The guy has stone hands like you wouldn't believe. So definitely, if he gets some targets, it's most likely they'll probably drop them. So definitely that will help separate Jesse James as far as the lead tight end in that offense. So there's another start for you if you have Jesse James. He's a good start this week.
There you go. You heard it here. So, all right. Kicker. I don't think is there any kicker one or two. I don't think we really need to get too in depth with kickers.
Definitely, as mentioned, this is sort of a same note that we keep hitting. Niners Chiefs, that's going to be an offensive show. So Robbie Gould will definitely get some points. He's the leading kicker in fantasy points right now. So special teams player of the week for the NFC as well.
There
So
you go.
definitely he'll get lots of opportunities. I also like Randy Bullock against the Panthers. I know the Panthers have a good defense, so that may limit how much Cincinnati will be able to move down the field. But because they'll be able to prevent possibly red zone scoring opportunities as far as touchdowns are concerned, I think that will set up Randy Bullock for a couple field goal opportunities as well. And in any divisional matchup, it's always good to have kickers. So I like Will Lutz versus the Falcons.
Yeah, Will Lutz. I like him. He always has the opportunities there. And last week was kind of an anomaly with the Saints. I mean, I guess they ended up scoring about 20, but having
Yeah.
3 points at halftime or shutout at
Hmm.
halftime. So we don't expect to see that week to week. So that's always Will Lutz is always a good kicking start.
Hmm.
All right, defenses.
So I got two for you.
I'm
Starting
just
defense.
gonna start with just saying the Vikings. They're playing the Bills. I'll start with that, but then you can
I
go
was
from there.
avoiding some obvious ones. So yeah,
Yeah,
Bears defense is a must start. Vikings defense is a must start. Jaguars defense is a must start. Those are three offenses that I don't think will be able to get any sort of traction against those
hmm
teams' defenses for sure. As far as some more interesting wrinkles, I got. I think we mentioned it before. I like the Dolphins in this game. So the Dolphins defense has been surprisingly actually pretty well
they
as
have looked
actually
good.
been playing pretty well these past 2 weeks, so I like them against the Raiders. The Raiders just haven't been as able to establish any sort of offensive identity right now, so this is a good week to start the Dolphins defense. And based on what we saw last week from both the Seahawks and from the Cowboys, I like the Cowboys defense against the Seahawks because the Seahawks offense, I mean, we talked about it before, just not the same offense that we're used to seeing. And the Cowboys defense looked pretty good, getting lots of pressure. I mean, I know we just totally um, badmouth the entire Giants team, but the Cowboys were able to generate a lot of pressure on Eli Manning. They were able to play well in the secondary as well, cover the run game as well. So definitely for those aspects, I like the Cowboys defense against the Seahawks this week, as far as starts are concerned.
Yeah, I think all valuable. As long as you can, if you're facing a offense with struggles and you got the defense, start them. If you're facing an offense powerhouse, find someone else. One thing I want to mention or ask you, I guess, before we just get to your DFS lineup,
Hmm.
Tennessee Titans. Blaine Gabbert, I think, is going to start again. Mariota is still having trouble with that kind of nerve feeling in his throwing arm. Is there anyone on the Titans you are starting? I mean, I hear Blaine Gabbert and I avoid anyone that's next to him. So
Yeah, once again, another former 49er surfaces. Blaine Gabbert, yeah, he's avoidable at all costs. Definitely don't start any sort of offensive weapon that he would throw to. So Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, the tight end replacing Delaney Walker, is definitely not one to start this week. The only guy I would potentially start is Dion Lewis, but even that, it's only if you have to.
Mm-hmm.
But even I don't like Dion Lewis's chances this week either. So yeah, I would avoid all Titans offensive players this week if you can.
Cool. Just wanted to bring that up. Yeah, I would
Mm.
as well. So, all right. Well, kind of a fun way to end it. I like going into for any DFS players putting their lineup together. They have 30 minutes before kickoffs. I know I'm going to throw one out here.
Hmm.
Ummer, and then we had Josh do it last week. He'll be with us again next week. Couldn't make it right now, but we like putting together a little our potential winning DFS lineup that you can go ahead and go on to one of those daily fantasy sites and purchase. So, Ummer, who's your premier DFS lineup this week?
So yeah, last week I just chose the best fantasy performance at each position, not really taking into account any sort of salary or DFS structure. So this week is a little bit better. So hopefully this one could be a little
Yeah,
bit more reliable
it
as
was a little
far as
more
your
on the
DFS.
fly last week. It was kind of put you on the
That
spot.
is
So
true.
now you had a little
That
time to
is true.
prepare. So,
But this one is a little bit better as far as like you can actually start this lineup. I'm actually starting this lineup in one DFS contest, so Patrick Mahomes. I
hmm
think the trend continues. The Niners secondary is questionable. They are able to generate a little bit of a pass rush, but based on what I've seen in the past two games, Kansas City has been able to get consistent good blocking for Patrick Mahomes, so he can sit there and just pick apart any secondary or any defense that he faces. So playing at home, that's a must start for sure. So Patrick Mahomes, running backs, Latavius Murray. As we mentioned, Dalvin Cook is out this week. Latavius Murray versus Buffalo. Enough said. Kenyon Drake against the Raiders. The Raiders have not been able to stop anybody as far as defensive rush, as far as the defense is concerned. So I do like Kenyon Drake to get involvement both in the running game and the passing game. Jumping into receivers, Adam Thielen against Buffalo, as mentioned. I think he'll get heavy involvement and get some scores definitely up on the board, get some big points. Other receivers, I like Cooper Cup from Los Angeles. I think everybody in that offense should get some heavy involvement, but I like Cooper Cup out of the slot to get some heavy targets. Past 2 weeks, he's been getting at least 6 targets in each game, and he's been converting all those targets with a high catch rate as well. So he's definitely a guy that you want to start both fantasy wise, and I like him as a cheap option for DFS. The last guy I like is Calvin Ridley, as we talked about before. I think
mm,
he's getting more involvement in the Atlanta offense with Devontae Freeman being out, so I think this is a good week for him to go off against the Falcons in a divisional matchup. Starting tight end, I got Zach Ertz. Carson Wentz loves to throw to Zach Ertz, and with his first week back, I think he'll be relying on Zach Ertz' familiar targets, especially with the limited capability they have at receivers. They got Nelson Aguilar, but Alshon Jeffrey is questionable, and his effectiveness is very in doubt as well. And besides that, they don't have too many other options as far as receivers are concerned. So definitely, I like Zach Ertz in that option against the Indianapolis Colts. In the flex position, Marshawn Lynch against the Dolphins. As mentioned, I don't like the Raiders' passing offense, but I do like the Raiders' rushing offense. So Doug Martin is not been the same Doug Martin that we're used to seeing, so that's why I liked Marshawn Lynch. He's been pretty consistent these past 2 weeks, so I predict that he should do pretty well against the Dolphins as well. And lastly, the defense, Chicago Bears defense against the Cardinals. I mean, just they've been looking so good. And speaking of the Raiders, I think as of right now, they're regretting that Khalil Mack trade because A,
hmm
they're not generating any sort of pass rush, and Khalil Mack is, I know it's only 2 weeks in, but he's my front runner for Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. I love that soundbite from John Gruden after the Bronco game. Him saying, "Some way we just need to figure out how to get a pass rush."
Oh yeah,
You had
oh
a
yeah,
way, bud, and that ship has sailed. So,
yes,
um,
yes, sailed very far away for sure.
yeah.
So
Well,
but
there
yeah,
you have it.
that's my DFS alignment for this week.
There you go. Entering leagues, tournaments, 50-50 games. There's your winning lineup right there. You heard it here at Sports El Dente live stream. Um, Ummer, it's been fun as always. I'm looking forward to doing this weekly. So Sunday mornings, we'll be hanging out. Josh will be with us next week. Um, enjoy some football, some Sunday. Good luck in all fantasy leagues.
Yeah, best of luck to everybody out there. Enjoy your week 3.
Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, we got about 20 minutes to kickoff. Drop us a line on either Twitter or on our website. I'd be happy to answer that. But hope you all enjoyed and enjoy football Sunday. Ummer, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks a lot, Ryan.